a touch in the past with Protestantism, but the courts and our institutions held the line of separation between church and state. A reminder.
I'm Blake Burman, tonight back home, handing out candy. But did he just tell Vladimir Putin, trick or treat? The new warning from the commander-in-chief is our nuclear program on its way back, how Russia is now responding tonight. Plus, Vice President J.D. Vance holding down the fort. But did any movement actually occur to end the government shutdown?
That is the way that the Democrats have operated. They are trying to take a hostage, and we can't reward that behavior. That's how a child behaves. That is not how a responsible governing party behaves in the United States of America.
That the administration's side of it this evening. This, though, as food stamp benefits could halt for millions of Americans, tens of millions, really, over the weekend. Also tonight, the briefings about the drug votes. What lawmakers said after emerging out of closed-door meetings today. And the president's deal with China, a massive purchase for farmers. How do they feel? Our Brian Enton out on the road continues his Driving the Vote series as Trump and Xi strike a trade truce. But first tonight, is it about to get spooky? Let's look at this, though, for a second. This is a live look. 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. All the sights and sounds coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You can see there President Trump and the First Lady, Melania Trump, handing out Halloween candy. It's pretty remarkable. Whatever you think about Donald Trump, consider this live shot for a moment. This morning, he was in South Korea, face-to-face, sitting down with Xi Jinping. Got on a plane, flew halfway around the world, and here he is tonight, doing some presidential duties alongside the First Lady, grabbing into the basket, I guess maybe to dole out some candy. Some of the sights and sounds over at 1600 as they continue this evening. It is a very stark contrast, though, for the last 24 hours. The commander-in-chief said a little more than boo to the world's nuclear powers. Trump saying he wants to resume nuclear weapons testing for the first time in 3 decades, assigning that task to the Department of War, calling it an equal basis with Russia and China. Now, the president first making that announcement on Truth Social just minutes before that meeting with Xi. He later said this aboard Air Force One.
We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. We've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
Now, Russia and North Korea recently announced tests of missiles that could potentially carry nuclear weapons. As for warheads, major powers haven't tested them in decades, as you might know. Our Kelly Meyer starts us off tonight live over at the White House. I don't think candy in hand just yet, but the night's early. Hello, Kelly.
That's right, Blake, and you could hear the music coming from the South Lawn from here on the North Lawn. But as far as this story, we don't have a lot of details just yet from the White House or the Pentagon. We were over there earlier today on what exactly this all means, Blake. The president just directing his Department of War to immediately begin nuclear weapons testing. He says to be on equal basis with other countries. China hasn't tested since 1992. Russia says they aren't testing but would if the U.S. starts. And while President Trump is looking to ramp up testing again for the first time in decades, he also says he would love to de-escalate. Listen to this.
I think de-escalation would be, they would call it denuclearization, would be a tremendous thing. And it's something we are actually talking to Russia about that, and China would be added to that if we do something.
Now, Blake, a short time ago, Vice President J.D. Vance was also here at the White House talking shutdown. But I also asked him about these tests and if it's making the world less safe. He didn't answer that, but he did say that the tests would be there to make sure everything is functioning properly and really for national security, he says. But today, the United Nations Secretary General said that nuclear testing can, quote, never be permitted. Blake.
Our Kelly Meyer. Live tonight over at the White House. Kelly, thank you. With me now, he is the retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert, back with us once again here on the Hill. Hello, sir.
Blake, great to be with you.
I mean, I didn't think we'd be talking about this today, but the president made the comments. You saw them. I have so much to ask you about this, but let's start here. The president says, do it, you do it. Can we just do it like that with resuming nuclear testing if we want?
Blake, two things there. Number one, it's actually the Department of Energy that has always done our nuclear testing.
Right.
Number two, even the Department of Energy estimates that it would take up to 3 years to prepare the infrastructure to do what the president suggested that he wanted to do immediately.
There's probably some people saying, well, that was then, this is now. Could we do it faster?
I don't think that there is the basic infrastructure, likely underground north of Las Vegas and Nevada, to do the type of testing and get meaningful results that could help us have a more well-functioning, higher probability functioning nuclear program.
So here was the Vice President. Kelly references J.D. Vance earlier today.
Sometimes you've got to test it to make sure that it's functioning and working properly. It's an important part of American national security to make sure that this nuclear arsenal we have actually functions properly, and that's part of a testing regime. To be clear, we know that it does work properly, but you got to keep on top of it over time.
Is he right there?
He is right, but what we don't know with respect to what the president said is if he's talking about the delivery mechanisms.
Right.
We do have new subs, new bombers, new intercontinental ballistic missiles that are coming out soon, whether he's talking about that, which we do want to make sure function properly, or the nuclear warhead themselves, which we use high-quality simulations to make sure that we are assured that they would work when we need them.
If it is the latter, where would you even test it? How would you go about it?
Like, likely it would be in some of those older underground nuclear testing facilities north of Las Vegas in Nevada, very remote area, but again, they haven't been used in 3 decades, as you said. It would be tough to spin them up to get meaningful results.
So President Trump was abroad, right? And when he was abroad, Kim Jong-un shoots another missile up into space, and Vladimir Putin had a nuclear-powered drone test that he was raving about. And if you're wondering, why did Trump bring this up all of a sudden? Is it that? I don't know. All I can tell you is that those events happened and then the president made his post. But it was interesting today, General, because Russia came out and said, no, that wasn't a nuclear test. Was it sort of point served by the commander-in-chief? Do you think Russia heard Trump and said, okay here?
I think they did. Putin is the only leader of a nuclear arsenal that has ever used that arsenal to threaten others. He's done it consistently for the last 3.5 years. The president has talked about submarines parked off their coast recently. Now this is the next gambit to help Putin understand that we are serious in taking his threat seriously.
Look, you know I don't do scare TV. Let's just show, though, the arsenals here that we have. I'm in my 40s, General. Okay, I hope to live another 50 years. But when you start doing this story and talking about it, and again, the president brought it up, it makes you think, like, all it takes is one madman, whether it's in hopefully the next 50 years of my life or however, on down the line. Is that the reality?
Blake, it is the reality for those that have these type of weapons, which is why we have been so adamant over the course of several decades that there is not proliferation.
Right.
Because the more countries that have them, the more chance there is that a madman at some point will have his hands on one and the authority to launch.
All right, just some of what it is across the world right now. John Teichert, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Blake.
Appreciate it. All right. As President Trump, by the way, returned to D.C. from that trip abroad, Air Force One actually hit a little bit of turbulence.
These are rough winds in Asia. I must tell you, this is a rough flight. We could have waited an hour, maybe. It's a little tough. These are tough conditions for interviews. You know, they're going to be watching Trump. They're going to say, he didn't look too good. He's got the shakes. I don't have the shakes, but people are going to think I do.
We've all been there, I guess, right? The president also facing a bumpy situation, though, upon landing, a government shutdown that's now 30 days old. Many Americans shouldering the burden of the ongoing shutdown. The second longest shutdown now in American history. And people across the country starting to feel the effects. For example, tomorrow, some federal workers set to miss their first full paycheck. 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 TSA agents around the country also working without pay. Of course, as the holiday travel season approaches, funding for SNAP benefits, you might know it as food stamps, expires on Saturday, and more than 40 million Americans, it's believed about 42 million, are on those programs. Also Saturday, open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, begins. Enrollees beginning to see a huge spike, some reporting like north of $1,000 over what they are normally paying when they start to log into those portals and see what's going on there. Both sides, this is where we've been for 30 days. They're doing this. They're pointing the finger at each other.
We're not going to allow anybody, Democrat or Republican, to effectively threaten any policy demand and to place that upon reopening the government. You don't reward hostage taking. If Democrats want to talk about health care policy, let's talk about health care policy.
Open enrollment begins in just 2 days, and Republicans have spent the entire shutdown with their heads in the sand.
Joining us now here on the Hill, California Republican Congressman Tom McClintock, a member of the Budget Committee, a home to a district congressman, I am told. More than 32,000 people just in your district alone are about to lose those critical SNAP benefits. Thanks for being with us tonight. What comes next here, Congressman? Because I see you at home in California. The House is out. The Senate just got out of town in the last few hours here, and I just ran through the deadline. So what happens next?
Well, it's not all that complicated. The House passed a simple bill to keep the government open at the same spending levels the Democrats approved earlier this year with no changes in law. Just keep the doors open while we finish the appropriations process. And the Senate Democrats are using cloture to block that simple bill in the Senate over their demands for $1.5 trillion of new spending at a time when the federal government is worse than broke. But we're borrowing nearly $2 trillion a year just to pay our bills.
I guess what I'm getting at, Congressman, is are we going to see 40 million Americans not get their SNAP benefits? Are we going to continue to see more missed paychecks? Are we going to get Americans the 20 million who use Obamacare, are they going to log in and see 2x premiums? Is that what's coming?
There is a very simple way to prevent that from happening, and that is to pass the simple continuing resolution. And remember your schoolhouse rock. The House sends an appropriation to the Senate. We did that on September the 19th. Then the Senate either changes the bill and sends it back to the House, or it passes the bill on to the president. Well, Schumer's blocking any action on it. So explain to me what the House can do at this point that it hasn't already done. This is entirely in Chuck Schumer's hands. And
what about negotiate something else?
Following him in the Senate.
What about negotiate something else? Maybe a side deal?
Well, again, there's nothing to negotiate because there's nothing in the continuing resolution that changes law. It simply keeps the doors open so that we can have those discussions.
You know, you made a post just the other day, Congressman, in which you said the following. You said, just as our federal workers aren't getting paid, I have to ask the House of Representatives to withhold my own compensation for the duration of the shutdown. You make and your colleagues make in the area of about $175,000. The average, the median household income in your district is $91,000. Don't you think that the folks in your district want a little more than just simply messaging tweets?
Well, it's a gesture. I agree, but it's a gesture that I felt was necessary because I couldn't look the TSA officers at the airport in the eye if I was being paid when they weren't, and they are required to show up for work. If you'll recall, just last week, a bill was placed on the floor by Ron Johnson in the Senate to pay all of the essential workers who are still required to show up for work. And aren't getting paychecks. It assured that they would be paid on time, and it was voted down by Senate Democrats. So, this is not complicated. It is at the feet of the Senate Democrats who continue to block this legislation, which would again simply keep the doors open so that we can have discussions over all of the issues that are facing the country.
Tom McClintock, a Republican from California. Thanks for being with us tonight, sir. Appreciate it. I should note the congressman's district involves Yosemite National Park. Got a live look at it right now. It is a beautiful day out there in Yosemite. The images come to us from the Yosemite Conservancy, if we have that. I was reading, Congressman, a report. There we go. Here was a local news report. It says, some say it's rife with unruly visitors, trash, and illegal behavior, while others say it's perfectly normal. Just some of the sights and sounds there out in Yosemite. Tom McClintock with us tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so what ultimately ends all this? Other side of the break, Mick Mulvaney, Dan Cannon, what they are hearing tonight about how the stalemate breaks. Plus, President Trump hosting Halloween at the White House just hours after coming back from Asia. Was his meeting with Xi a trick or a treat? And hello to our Brian Enton. Where on earth, or I guess in America, are you tonight, Brian? Brian will tell us on the other side of the break. He continues our Driving the Vote series when we return.
With Charmin.
So are you more Starburst, Kit Kat? What do you like? We're about to find out here in the upcoming days for a whole lot of folks. Halloween, of course, tomorrow, and would you look at what's going on there at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The president, the first lady, handing out candy there to young kids. It's actually kind of remarkable when you think about it. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Trump was in South Korea this morning talking to Xi Jinping, and here he is, 6:20 tonight. Doing the thing as the president of the United States. Pretty cool images there. All fun there at that end of Pennsylvania Avenue, but on the other side, day 30 of the federal government shutdown, and all that's happening is this. They're pointing the fingers this way, right? And nobody can really tell you an off-ramp. But tonight, Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff, first Trump White House NewsNation contributor, Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns, with me now here on the Hill to tell us how this thing is going to end. He has 4 ways, you have 3, so he won the coin toss.
I'm not sure that word. By the way, the answer to your question is crackle.
Crackle.
Oh, that's
Crackle.
yours? Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
You only get it at Halloween.
All right, Cannon's keys, the 4 ways that this could end.
Okay.
Tell me. Let's show it and tell me.
First thing is election results coming on Tuesday, guys. And I think we're all tracking Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic side, in Virginia and New Jersey, expected to win. Spanberger by more than Sherrill. But it's been closer in New Jersey. And I think if that election is tighter for Democrats, let's say we win one but not the other, or it's a squeaker in New Jersey, and the narrative is Dems did not take advantage of the moment politically. That's going to maybe get some weakness on our side. But if we win handily, it's going to stiffen some spine and suggest that Trump has lost some of the politics and we should retain. The second piece is what I would call the hot stove category here. Hot stove meaning that the SNAP benefits and the healthcare premiums on the ACA are really going to come to fruition. And if people are shopping for their premiums this coming month, as you pointed out in the last segment, and they see these $1,000 increases, and they're calling their members of Congress, that heat's going to materialize for Congress. And the same thing on SNAP, as 40 million Americans stop getting benefits, who's to blame for that will come and change some of the leverage. That's item number 2. Republicans could get a little squishy.
All right, you got 4 here, but in the Halloween theme, let's grab bag, pick one of the 2, the SNAP benefit expiration and then President Trump. We know the SNAP benefit expiration, that's on Saturday for 42 million Americans. So let's go to the end of the screen. What do you mean by Trump?
I think that Trump is the wild card here who could cut a deal if he wants to, for a couple reasons. One, if he comes back and sees the leverage has changed for whatever reason, and his polling on the economy is bad, Jay Powell is saying, I don't want to touch rates in December because I can't trust the economy with the shutdown and with your tariffs. His agenda is in peril, the midterms are in peril, and he's not beholden, Blake, to the same Republican orthodoxy on the ACA as Hill Republicans are. He could decide, as the president should, in my view, bring people to the table and cut a deal.
You agree with any of that?
No, none of that. He's wrong about all of those. Here's what to look for. Number 1. Where's my graphic? So it's over there.
Here, let me give it to you.
There you go. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's got to be some kind of off-ramp for a side deal. What passed the House is the only thing that can pass. You might be able to change the date, November 21st to December 1st or whatever, but the House can't pass anything else. So whatever happens in the Senate has to build around what is passed in the House, and any deal is going to be what we call a sidecar. We pass the House.
Handshake agreement.
Handshake
if
deal.
you pass it, we'll do that.
Yeah, maybe a side-by-side vote on the Obamacare premium, something like that. It has to be a sidecar, so watch for those discussions. Number 2, watch for moderate Democrat senators to start to distance themselves from Chuck Schumer. We're in a lot of this because what happened to him in March when he voted for the CR and got in a lot of trouble. He's afraid of losing a Democrat primary. Moderate Democrat senators might start to care a lot less about that as we get into this. And lastly, maybe most importantly, Turkey Day travel. If people start to realize, you know what, I might not be able to go see Grandma on Thanksgiving. Now I'm really upset about the shutdown, and they start making phone calls.
Mick,
do you agree with any of that?
I think all that makes sense. And Mick,
no, listen, the job here is for me to disagree with you. You agree with me.
But don't you agree that Donald Trump, who's not beholden to Republicans on the ACA, could cut a deal if he really wanted to?
Yes. He is a different orthodoxy.
What about Schumer?
What about Schumer?
Could he really cut a deal if he wanted to, real quick?
Well, he could cut a deal if there's actually a deal. So far, the deal is, hey, just end the shutdown, guys, and maybe we'll give you a vote. That's not a deal. If there's actually a deal for a solution on the health care problem, and the point I make here,
vote for a solution, not necessarily.
No, a solution, a package that is going to pass and get through, then that is something they could cut, I think.
Let me leave you with this.
Yes.
If you were walking through that line right now, you're one of the kids, and you get a moment with Donald Trump, what are you telling him?
How are you doing this after you were traveling for 36 hours?
What are you telling them?
I'll take a Kit Kat.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. These two back later in the show. Still much more ahead. Speaking of later in the show, President Trump back home tonight after bragging about that sit down with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, saying it's a 12 out of 10. So what's in it for American farmers? Our Brian Ensign back out on the road. There you are. Where are you tonight, my man?
Listen, I'm going to give you a hint, Blake.
Okay.
We're back on the road in the RV. We are in an American city that is famous for their sauerkraut balls. So I will have the latest on the sauerkraut balls and politics and American farmers coming up, Blake.
That's on the other side. Ensign, stand by. .30 on the dot here on the East Coast after months of rising tension. A bit of a truce in the trade war with China. President Trump returning to D.C. this afternoon from South Korea, where he met with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The two making some big announcements with big implications here in the U.S. The president saying, in his view, the meeting went great.
Overall, I guess on the scale of from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12. It was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there.
News Nation team coverage tonight, halfway around the world and back. Our Brian Ensign speaking with soybean farmers. This was a big part of the deal today. Brian's hearing about the real impacts of the deal. But first, our Robert Sherman. Good morning once again from South Korea, Robert.
Good morning to you, Blake. I mean, from North America all the way out here to Asia, millions of people had their eyes laser focused on this sit down, the meeting of all meetings between President Trump and President Xi. And the Chinese leader addressed the elephant in the room right from the beginning. There's palpable friction that exists between these two economic powerhouses. But despite all of that, the takeaway, according to President Trump, is that there's enough room in order to have an agreement and the premise for a deal. This is what we're looking at here. On the one hand, agriculture, soybeans. You've heard a lot about that in recent weeks. Well, the president is saying the Chinese have agreed to purchase 12 million metric tons of soybeans from now until January. Rare earth minerals, the free flow of those without export controls. Coordination to stop the flowing of fentanyl. That's a big one when it comes to China. Commitments to purchase American energy. All in all, this was enough to bring down the tariff rate, according to the president. Take a listen.
It was 57, now it's 47. Because we reduced it by the fentanyl. Because I believe they are really taking strong action. We've already seen the action on fentanyl.
And what's Beijing's takeaway from all of this? President Xi saying, quote, the world today is confronted with many tough problems. China and the United States can jointly shoulder our responsibility as major countries and work together to accomplish more great and concrete things for the good of our two countries and the whole world. Beijing came into this meeting hoping that the lines of communication would remain open between the United States and China. And there is a tentative agreement in which President Trump will go to China next year, and President Xi will head your way to Washington sometime later. Blake?
All right, and as they say in this town, we'll see what happens. Robert Sherman, safe travels back. Thank you. All right, so China historically has been the biggest customer for America's soybean farmers. And this deal comes just 1 week before Election Day in many states across this country. Our Brian Ensign back out on the road, hearing directly from many of those farmers in his series, Driving the Votes. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Blake. Yeah, we're on the road. We're in the RV. We're driving across the country. We made it here to Akron, Ohio. A little rainy tonight, but there are a ton of soybean farmers here in Ohio. We also talked to some when we were on the road in Kentucky and Tennessee, and I can tell you so many of them are so relieved that there is finally a deal here between the United States and China. It is not hard to fathom the time, treasure, and toil that went into planting this expansive crop of soybeans in central Kentucky. What's tough to understand Despite the new trade deal that President Trump says will have the Chinese buying soybeans again, the farmer behind all this says he still won't make a single dime of profit.
These soybeans will probably lose $150 to $175 an acre. That's a $180,000 loss for my operation. And I'm not unique to anybody else in this area.
Caleb Ragland is a proud 9th-generation Kentucky farmer. He's also president of the American Soybean Association.
Due to complications with trade policy and relations between our governments, China has not purchased any soybeans from this crop that American farmers are growing in 2025.
With President Trump announcing a trade deal with his Chinese counterpart, that's expected to change. Ragland, a lifelong conservative and Trump supporter, is grateful for the news. Still, he's anxiously waiting to see how it'll impact many materials needed to grow his crop. Imported fertilizer, herbicides, and pesticides are currently slapped with retaliatory tariffs, and farmers are footing the bill.
Tariffs are a tax, and when there is a tax, it raises the cost.
A lot of the soybeans in this area make it here, where they're taken off trucks and then loaded onto these barges and taken down the mighty Mississippi River. And while China may not be buying soybeans, there still are other countries buying beans from the American farmer.
Some of them go to Mexico, some of them might go to Nigeria.
Ben Westerfield's job at Hopkinsville Elevator Company is getting soybeans to exporters. While soybean prices are down about 20% from 2 years ago, he's still able to keep the supply flowing.
No, it is not China. No, it's not 80 to 100 million bushels or 100 million tons, whatever they're buying right out the gate. But we're piecemealing barges out at a time, and we're loading those barges, and we've got a market for them.
The biggest market, China, is the most important.
China is not a market that you give up on, or you say, well, we'll just find somebody else.
So 50% of the soybeans that come out of the United States traditionally have gone to China. And what's interesting, Blake, is you ask, why does China need so many soybeans? It's actually because they have more pigs than anyone else in the entire world, and the pigs eat the soybeans because they have a high rate of protein. Blake?
Fascinating, and it was interesting hearing that farmer, Brian, talk about how they would lose $180,000 because of this. I know you've seen this chart. I wanted to show this to our audience. And Brian, stick with me here for a second, because this is Chinese soybean purchases over the last decade, right? And here's what you notice. These 2 years right here and this year right here, if you take that out of the equation, everything's fairly steady. What are these 2 years? The first trade war. What is this year? The resumption, as the president describes it, as the quote-unquote trade war. So do they feel relief, Brian, that there's a deal? Or is it frustration that there's these ups and downs?
Yeah, I think there's obviously relief because there was nothing to be hopeful for a couple of days ago. But I think they're still concerned about how this is going to play out, and also the commitment from China for 12 million. I think it's metric tons. I mean, that's still far less than what they're used to selling them over the last couple of years. And you heard that farmer who I interviewed there, Caleb, super great guy, huge President Trump fan, but regardless of them making the deal now, he's lost everything. I mean, you saw how big his farm is. He's making zero money because of what's gone on here between China and the United States.
Hey, before you run, tell me about the sauerkraut.
Oh my God, the sauerkraut balls. I thought you'd never ask.
Yeah.
Check this out. I'll have a quick bite of one before we run. I never had a sauerkraut ball.
They're known for that in Akron?
Yeah, it's Akron. This is what they're famous for. It's like a cheesy kind of like fried ball.
Huh.
Very good.
5:30 there in Akron. Don't fill up too much. Our Brian Henton live for us tonight. We'll catch you tomorrow. Brian, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
You're like
safe. Yeah, safe travels. All right. By the way, next Tuesday, our pregame for our special election coverage starts right here on the Hill, 6 o'clock Eastern, and then 7 o'clock Eastern, live results. Hope you stay with us all night long here on News Nation. By the way, both days, catch me in the morning. Morning in America, doing double duty as the election rolls in. All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill, outrage and fury from Democrats after they were left out of a White House briefing explaining the deadly strikes on suspected drug boats. But did you actually learn anything inside of these briefings? What we know about them when we return. All right, so as the U.S. strikes alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, by the way, House Democrats emerged from a classified briefing today on the Armed Services Committee, fuming, saying they don't know what the administration's end game is.
I heard no strategy, no end game, no assessment of how they are going to end the flow of drugs into the United States.
There's nothing that we heard in there that changes my assessment that this is completely illegal.
Am I leaving satisfied? Absolutely not.
Since September, the U.S. has launched attacks against at least, as we know of this evening, 14 boats, killing at least 61 alleged, as the administration puts it, narco-terrorists. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, once again, former chief of staff in the first Trump administration. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. Naveen Nayak, back with us. Thanks for coming back in, Naveen, Democratic strategist. Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden-Harris campaigns. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Thanks for coming in. I'm going to start with the former congressman. Do they have a beef?
Which ones? The Senate Democrats do.
The House Democrats.
No, they don't. They never told us anything in the House. The only people in the House and the Senate who actually get real intelligence are the folks who are on the intelligence committees. I never went to a single top secret classified briefing the 6 years I was in Congress and saw anything that I hadn't already read about in the Washington Post or the New York Times. That's just the way it is. They don't like it because it's Donald Trump. I get that. The Senate Democrats who are on the Intel Committee, they probably have a beef.
So you all good with that explanation?
Yeah, we can go home. I don't have to come back for a while. I think there's the volume of questions here. It's not about intelligence and some secret thing that we don't know about. I think people are like, what are we doing? I mean, there's just a basic question here of there's no authority that, other than an executive order, which no one thinks is legal right now as a act of violence and war in the middle of the ocean against an undisclosed opponent that the U.S. has not declared. Like, the volume of I don't think any of those people walking out of the House were like, we want to know the secret. I think we want to know what is the White House's strategy here, and that's really terrifying.
I agree with my friend Naveen, obviously, but this is a pattern, and it's not so much about what the House is going to learn or not learn in those kind of briefings. To your point, Mick, maybe it wouldn't be nothing or much, at least, in those kind of settings. But there's a history here, a record of blatant lack of respect for transparency and working with Democratic colleagues or anyone else on what's happening in the administration. 35 times, judges in court have told the Trump administration, you've lied to us in court. The cabinet goes and testifies in front of committee hearings and lies repeatedly about what they're doing or won't answer questions. They won't have Democrats come to briefings, and then they do these things that are clearly illegal without a sense of the plan for the American people. That lack of transparency in a plan and willfully avoiding any questions whatsoever is not appropriate for an administration.
I do note, and you've agreed with me on this before, Barack Obama was droning people all over the world as well. At that point in time, there was outrage back then. Sure. Just noting, back then it happened, obviously a much different scenario now. Do we deserve to know? I mean, we have the videos. Do we deserve to know what's what?
Well, I think the Trump administration actually has made it very clear. They've gone on offense against fentanyl coming across our borders, and they will take any measure to attack that, including using the broad authority of Article 2, which President Trump can do. Other presidents have done it, and that's what's happening here. And I think we remember how we got here. Over 100,000 people died from fentanyl under President Biden. So if you're going to take this tact and go after the warships, you should.
We skipped Trump's term in there.
It's been a problem for a while. I had James Story sitting in this chair the other day, Mick. He's the former ambassador to Venezuela. Here's what he said, and then I want to get your reaction.
We have such a military buildup now in the Caribbean that I anticipate, with the arrival of the Gerald Ford in particular, that the president has an array of options before him. Anything within the 12 nautical mile zone of Venezuela, something on land, maybe a clandestine airstrip, or up to and including a complete decapitation of the government if he were to choose to do so.
You've been in this situation with Donald Trump. Yeah. What do you think he does here?
I got it. The Donald Trump that I knew in the first term would never start a land war in Venezuela. It's just, I've been in those meetings where there were people begging him to do that, some of whom you would know, right? Some of whom have been recently indicted. That's another story. And Donald Trump was always, no, why would I do that? That's foolish. Why would I get it? I understand why Trump is doing things with the drug boats, okay? I might disagree with some things. I might want to know more if I'm a member of Congress. How do we know there's no citizens there? I get all of that, okay? I don't understand this, oh my goodness, we're going to contemplate decapitating the Maduro government. This is what John Bolton begged him to do for 2 years, and Trump rightfully pushed back against it because that's not what he does. So I'm not really sure where this is coming from.
It's about getting the drugs.
Well, you think it's just drugs?
I think right now
not
these
oil,
moves
not
are about
socialism
drugs.
in the Caribbean.
These are about drugs.
Well, we had
or
drugs.
he'd go further.
We had drugs in
Mexico
2019.
is responsible for such a larger portion of the drugs. I don't even know what we're talking about.
Trump
Venezuela.
told us for 10 years that the drugs came from Mexico.
Yeah, what are we doing?
And that now it's a different different narrative.
And he's tried to use the alien enemies.
Not saying, by the way, that that's the only place they come from, but that was
Sure. But he's already gone after the Mexico route, right, by closing our borders. Now he's taking to another route with the drug boats.
We can't ignore the fact that he's already used and tried to use the Alien Enemies Act against Venezuelan migrants and others here. This is a pretext, or could be in some ways, to do that further. And if that's the agenda, that's what he wants to try to accomplish, he owes an explanation to Congress and the American people.
All right, meantime, the president, as you know, just got back home from Asia. He all but dismissed during that trip the possibility of running for a third term, but suggested another duo for 2028. New BFFs, apparently, Vice President J.D. Vance and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And during a Turning Point USA event at Ole Miss last evening, some in attendance maybe caught wind of that. Because when the Vice President took to the stage, he was met with chants of 48, meaning the person who will be the next president. Watch.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, ladies and gentlemen.
What do you make of that?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's a long time until 2028. Look, I think we'd be lucky to have Vance and Rubio, but Republicans also have a very deep bench. And my biggest takeaway, actually, from this, and I wonder if you feel the same, Mick, and since we know a lot of the same people, the teams around Rubio and Vance are the same teams. So these are all people that have worked together for a really long time in Washington, D.C., have great depth when it comes to Capitol Hill. And I think it'll be interesting to see if they can even get along.
Why are you smirking?
Because we know the people.
No, I'm going to say the same thing in a different way, which is I'm sort of visualizing Presidential Apprentice 28. Donald Trump sits back and has the line of 10 or 12 really good candidates to try and get his endorsement.
And he gives them a hat.
That's exactly.
And you guys are going to say, when it gets to Iowa, the gloves are off. Right?
No, like listen. First of all, that was a huge event and almost a testament to Kirk, and you know it's really impressive. They filled that stadium. Donald Trump could do that, and he's not. What's surprising is he's not playing. Oh, let's see, and forcing all these people to compete. He's actually already put his, hand on Vance's shoulder, and I think at the end of the day, you're right. He gets to decide.
You just basically ran 2 presidential campaigns in the last election.
Don't recommend it in one cycle. One only, please.
What do you make of that?
I think that's right, that it's probably Vance, and the hand is largely on his shoulder. Every now and again, he throws Rubio in there, which I think is probably designed to keep Vance from getting too far ahead of himself on this stuff. My only question, Blake, is what J.D. Vance is going to show up. There's like 7 of them. We've got to find out which one he wants to be in 2028.
Mick raised the hand. I'll give you the last word.
There's a name that everybody forgets when they talk about this, the chosen one, the next one, right? The anointed successor. Don't forget about Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's extraordinarily close to the president. She's one of his favorites. She's a great governor, and she's a good campaigner. So, no, there's a bunch of really good people on the bench. Don't mistake, I think they're a great couple, a great combo for an endorsement, because it's not even close to that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come, other side of the break. Should taxpayers foot a $53 million buyout for this man right here? They're all shaking their heads up here. The governor of Louisiana today, on why he said he got involved with the firing of the head football coach.
We'll give you Luke Fickell. We'll take him. We'll save everyone $100 million.
I'm available. Jeff, I texted Landon.
Dating an attacker from over 60 feet. At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to learn more.
All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, here's some of what's trending over at thehill.com. The Pentagon orders quick reaction force of 500 troops per state. According to reports, some 23,000 National Guard troops will be trained in crowd control and civilian disturbance as part of a new quick reaction force meant for U.S. cities. Also this, Vance, the vice president, spars with college students at Turning Point USA event. The VP sat in with Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, taking questions from students at Ole Miss. Here's one of the more interesting exchanges regarding immigration.
When you talk about too many immigrants here, when did you guys decide that number? Why did you sell us a dream.
Please.
I have no intention of causing a scene here or anything, but
we're not close.
And the VP said you're not close to causing a scene at all. Finally, there's this, just breaking. King Charles III stripping Prince Andrew of titles from, and evicting him rather, from the royal residence. That according to multiple reports. That Prince Andrew, as you know, hosted Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at the Royal Lodge, the Prince's residence on Windsor Castle grounds. Today, Andrew lost his royal status, and King Charles, his older brother, is evicting him from the royal residence. Check out those stories and more. All you have to do is head on over to thehill.com. All right, time for my take now. So how about this question? Should taxpayers pick up the bill for a fired football coach? LSU, Louisiana State, now on the hook for Brian Kelly's $53 million buyout. Kelly was fired on Sunday, and the discussions around that big decision took place inside the governor's mansion. You know, we talked about this last night, but today, Governor Landry explaining part of it to Pat McAfee on ESPN. Watch.
On Sunday, I had a meeting with the lawyers as they were talking about whether or not Brian Kelly was terminated, whether we were going to fire him. And all I cared about were the taxpayers of our state. And that contract binds the state of Louisiana. If we have to pay $53 million and somebody else doesn't step up to foot that bill, the state of Louisiana has to foot that bill.
Now, are there big money donors who will pick up the tab? Probably, right? Is every state and university different? Yes. But consider this. Already this season, 12 college head football coaches have lost their jobs. Buyouts totaling $169 million. So it looks like, yes, the role of governor now stretches from dealing with lawmakers Monday through Friday to watching the scoreboard on false Saturdays. I thank you so much for watching us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Burman. Hope you have a good one. Is there life on Mars?